Hello, beautiful souls. My name is Jessie, and welcome to my Tiny Talks podcast, the show where we'll dive into self-love, inner child healing, and discovering your soul's purpose. I look forward to chatting with you every single Sunday and helping you grow exponentially in all areas of your life. Without further ado, here's today's Tiny Talk. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to my Tiny Talks podcast. I am your host, Jessie Brown, and I am so excited to be here with you all today as we dive into week 38 of Tiny Talks. This week, we are going to be diving into reasons why being alone is oftentimes better than being unfulfilled. And today's podcast episode is in the context of both friendships, but also personal relationships and intimate relationships, of sometimes why being alone for a little bit of time or for a stretch of time can help us refocus our outlook and just really let us know how far we've come and how much we've grown. Because if we're even questioning why being alone might be better, there's definitely a sign that there might be some growth there. So I am so excited to dive into today's content with you guys. If you haven't checked out last week's episode, all about if you're comparing yourself to the right people, I definitely encourage you to check out that episode after this one. And without further ado, I am so excited to jump into today's podcast with you guys. So I got today's podcast episode kind of one day out of the blue, and the more that I thought about it, the more that I realized how in alignment this podcast episode is going to likely be for a lot of people. Because I think that we're all guilty at some time in our life, in some way, shape, or form, of staying in relationships that are no longer serving us, but we often have a really hard time removing ourselves from those relationships because they're comfortable, right? And when we get comfortable around certain people, we feel like they are our people, and how am I ever going to move on or meet other people or whatever that's going to look like, right? All those things that we tell ourselves, and we often end up feeling less than, and we feel like our own self-worth is crushed in the end, because when we get around those people that we know that we're questioning being around, we often feel icky or some type of way when we're around them, or there's a reason that's coming up of why we're even questioning it in the first place. And so if that's you in your friendships, if that's you in your intimate relationships, if that's you with work, whatever it is, sometimes asking ourselves if staying put where we are is actually going to benefit us or if it's going to set us back. Because if we ask ourselves in a year's time from now, if I were to make this decision today to remove myself from this situation, what would my life look like? It would look completely different. And it's pretty surreal for me to even be expressing this podcast episode specifically this month, because it was about exactly a year ago that I had officially decided to move back to my hometown, get out of a 3-year relationship, leave multiple friendships behind. And at the time, it felt like my world was crumbling down. Like I would never meet any other people. Those were the only people that were ever supposed to be in my life. My life was over. What was I going to do? Right? We start to catastrophize and think all the worst possible things that could happen. Instead of now, how I like to think of things is, well, if we're able to take something out, doesn't that technically mean we're making room for new? And if we're noticing that something isn't still in alignment, it doesn't take away from the time that was spent together. Because I think that we often forget that just because something might no longer be serving us, it's exactly that. It's no longer serving you. It doesn't mean that it never was or never had a place or didn't need to be in your life in some way, shape, or form at a certain time. Because I know for a fact that certain friendships that I had in the past were the exact friendships that I needed at that time, based on my life, based on my awareness, based on my goals, based on what I was doing in life. But now, if I were to put myself with those same friendships, I really think that they would clash and they wouldn't be aligned. And that's nothing to bring anybody else down or make anybody else feel less than, because it's something that we all experience and something that we all go through. And I think it's a normal, healthy part of life. Right? If you even think back of all the people that have come and flown in and out of your life, they likely taught you something, but also you can very easily realize in those moments how many people really do come and go in our life. And we also never realize when those people might circle back, or maybe they never will again. who's to say? But the goal of today's episode is to just chat about some reasons of why being alone is better than unfulfilled. Because I am someone who pretty much my whole life, I felt like I needed to have people around me. I needed to be in a relationship. I needed. And I never took that time for myself to get to know myself. And looking back now, having done quite a bit of time by myself in reflection, I can realize that I was attracting the same people over and over and over again. And that's exactly what happens, is that we kind of attract what we feel we deserve in some way, shapes, or form, depending on our childhood, experiences that we've gone through, traumas that we've experienced. We start to paint a picture of the people that we want or think we deserve in our life, and we keep attracting the same things over and over again. And when I was finally able to take some time by myself to get to know myself from my perspective, not from other people's perspective, I was really shocked at, how much of my life was so out of alignment and how much my values were so out of alignment. So of course, that was trickling into my mental health and my confidence. And so the first point that I have for you guys of why being alone is oftentimes, it is better than being unfulfilled. I'm saying oftentimes, but being alone is 100% better than being unfulfilled. And my first point for that is because you're hurting your own mental health and you're hurting your own self-love. Because think about it. We've all had at least one friendship or intimate relationship in our life that ended for a reason. But at some point in those relationships, you could never imagine your life without them. But when we start to question it and we start to feel like it's not in alignment and like maybe there could be something else better out there and maybe it's not fully it or whatever it is, and we reminisce on that, we begin to hurt our own mental health and self-love. Because when we do that, we're constantly letting ourselves down. Because when I was getting out of my 3-year relationship, I remember thinking to myself, I've already put in 3 years of work and commitment and learning, and I don't know if I'm ready to start over and do that all over again. And I can hear now, even just saying that back to myself, we're pretty guilty of that. Where we just get so comfortable that we don't want to take risks because risks could mean feeling uncomfortable. But I just remember every time I would go home or we would get into another argument or something would happen, but I would still go back, I just felt myself losing touch with myself. I remember when I finally moved home, I just felt like I was in my body again. And again, I share all these things not to undermine other people. It's not about that. It's about focusing on yourself and how you feel in those moments, because I knew that I was losing touch with myself. I was shaping my life around other people because I wanted to keep the peace. I wasn't making as big of goals or going for as big of things because I was constantly thinking about how that was going to affect other people. And I'm learning now that I can have both of those, and the right person will accept that. And so my first point again is hurting your own self-love. Because it's really hard on our heart and on our mind when we know something's not in alignment, but we keep going back and we keep doing it over again. It's like when we eat junk food nonstop, right? Or we have an addiction going on, or we don't go to the gym for a long time, or make promises and let ourselves down. Whatever it is, they all kind of fall into each other because they all affect our view of self. And in my opinion, anything that affects your view of self, especially when it's in your control, that's up to you to make that pivot, and only you can make that change. And I do just want to validate that I know it can be excruciatingly hard to remove yourself from friendships and relationships, because if you're anything like me, you don't want to hurt anybody. You don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. You want to keep the peace. But I'm realizing now that, what about the peace within yourself? What about the love within yourself? Because for pretty much my whole life, that's how I lived. It was keeping the peace, keeping everybody around me happy, and I was last. And I realize now, hindsight, that trickled into so many areas of my life. Depression, my school grades, feeling less than, attracting the same people, putting up with way too much crap. Right? That is why being alone is better than unfulfilled, because it allows you to listen to your own thoughts, your own heart, your own interests, your own non-negotiables, your own values, and getting clear on that. Because until we get clear and honest with ourselves of what we want, unfortunately, we likely will keep attracting the same people over and over again. And I realize that everybody kind of realizes this at different times, and people have different relationships. But I also know that the human instinct isn't to want to be alone. It's not derived in us to want to be alone. And I've kind of flipped in that, where now I thrive being alone, so much to the point that it's become toxic in the other swing. And that's an episode for a whole other day, right? But when we get to be alone, we're able to be honest with ourselves and sit just with peace. Because I know for me also, being in relationships was a cover to mask emotions and traumas that I had suppressed. Because if I can just cover that up with a relationship, I don't have to think about it. And so that's when I noticed the same things were coming up, the same triggers. I was responding in the same way, and I wasn't healing. And I think oftentimes we do those things without realizing it. We don't realize when we get into a relationship, it's because we have fear of being alone. And again, like I was saying, our human instinct isn't to be alone. We're driven to want to be around other people, community, right? That's been wired in us since the beginning of time, of instinct, of survival, of being around other people. And so it can be really uncomfortable for us humans to sit and to be alone. But I promise you, even if you're in a happy relationship and you're so fulfilled and you want to stay there, and that's amazing, that's incredible. But how are you still taking time for yourself? How are you still getting to know yourself? That is what I'm going to challenge you on. My second point of why being alone is better than unfulfilled is a huge one. And it's kind of an obvious one that I think we forget about, but it's taking away potential of meeting new people. Because oftentimes the quote unquote right people will come into our life and we often overlook it. And I definitely view myself as a spiritual person and believe in spirituality. And I do believe that nothing will genuinely pass us by. Because if something's meant for us, it will find us. But I do also believe that if we stay in the wrong areas and we're cognizant of that and we choose to stay, we are putting out there that we're willing to pass up whatever is next. Because if we're having that inside conversation with ourselves, and our higher self and our intuition is telling us that it's time to get out of that friendship, get out of that relationship, and we choose to stay, we are the ones making that decision to not allow for new to come in. Because I even think about this, I've recently been cleaning out my closet and getting rid of things, and my mind goes to, oh, well, now I can make room for new. And it's like, why don't I think about that in the grand scheme of things in life? Decluttering the things out of my life that are no longer serving me to allow room for those new things to flow in. Because again, that's a sign of growth, and we're meant to ebb and flow for things to go and things to return. Or maybe they don't return. Maybe we release and let room for new to come in. But if we're constantly just stuck and staying with the same people doing the same things, it's really hard for us to even be open-minded enough to meet new people. And so it takes away the potential of meeting new people. My third point, which I kind of already touched on, but being alone allows like a new sense of growth. Because it allows you to establish a routine, to establish the foods that you like to eat, to establish the activities you like to do, your non-negotiables, right? Your little quirks that only you like to do, that are unique to you. There's things that I've learned about myself being alone that I never really realized sharing a living space with somebody else, because we were constantly just trying to co-live with each other, that we often forgot about doing the things that we both individually liked. And so when we're alone and we're able to grow and to listen to that, we're able to find things that are in alignment and to listen to that from our own perspective. We're able to do the work and to heal. Because when we're alone, things will come up. Thoughts will come up, feelings will come up, sensations will come up. I always think of trauma healing and healing in any way of like climbing a mountain. And once you start that climb, it gets steep. It gets steep, it gets steep. And as you get closer to the top, it gets harder. And that's where most people run back down because it's just too much. But when you can get over that hump of the mountain and come down the other side and just have that grace period for a little bit, you'll start to notice that, yeah, the mountains are still there and there's always going to be mountains to climb. But sometimes they're a little bit smaller. Sometimes it's a little bit easier, maybe a little flatter instead of so steep. Right? Our mental and healing journey is no different. And so when we're alone and those things come up and we're able to heal and process through them for the first time, that guides us towards finding alignment and finding our purpose. And the huge goal of my podcast as a whole is to help folks find their purpose. Because we all have a purpose. We all have a reason that we're here. But if we're stuck in those friendships and relationships that are no longer serving us or are no longer sparking those things within us, we're likely driving the opposite direction of our purpose and of our dharma, which again is going to flow into our higher self and our self-love and mental health, right? And so being alone just allows you to grow and to find alignment and to listen to the things that are unique about you, and will allow you to project that back into the universe of what it is that you want to attract into your life, the right people that you want to attract in your life. And so just think about that for a moment of how that would feel for you to just take some time. And again, maybe this isn't you and maybe this doesn't land for everybody, and that's okay. Maybe you needed this at some point in your life, and it's okay to validate that for yourself now of how far you've come. But I think just, again, being aware of why having alone time and sitting with yourself is so important. And yes, it's uncomfortable, and yes, it's hard. But those are the things that help us grow and to push us to be the next best version of ourselves. My fourth point is something very, very near and dear to my heart. And it's that when we stay in relationships and friendships that aren't serving us, we often feel really lonely, right? Like that's why we want to kind of leave in the first place, because we sense a sense of loneliness, of unacceptance, of unfulfilled, whatever it is. But the more that we stay in those relationships, the lonelier that you'll become. And I learned something when I was in group coaching with Next Level University last year. And I was on a one-on-one coaching call. I was being coached, and basically Alan, the host, had said, what areas of your life are bringing you pleasure and what areas of your life are bringing you fulfillment? And I've never forgot about that conversation because it resonated and landed so deeply that most things that I do now to this day, I will ask myself, is this bringing me short-term pleasure or is this bringing me long-term fulfillment? Because we are creatures of, again, wanting that instant gratification, right? We want things, we want it now. We want them quick. We want them yesterday, right? You see all these diet hacks and all these different life hacks of things that you can do to just speed up time, because time is our most limited thing that we have. And so if we can get something fast and get that pleasure, we often feel good, but we only feel good for a short period of time, because the thing about pleasure is it's not sustainable. But fulfillment is. Because if you're hanging out in an area that you feel fulfilled, that has more momentum. That's going to stick around longer. And so to my point of becoming lonelier, if you're asking yourself if a relationship is bringing you just pleasure and safety, or if it's bringing you fulfillment, that will likely give you your answer. And I definitely encourage you to ask that in all areas of your life. If you're about to eat something, is this giving me short-term pleasure, or is this going to give me fulfillment to my future self? Everything that we do on a day-to-day basis, if we ask ourselves that question, you'll realize how much we truly are letting ourselves down. And when we let ourselves down too much, that can almost make ourselves feel lonely in our own body. And so my point number 4 is that you'll become lonelier. Because when we're hanging around people that aren't a vibrational match or aren't a frequency match or aren't operating the same as us, we start to deplete ourselves and lose touch with ourselves and step away from our purpose, step away from our highest self. And that allows us and causes us to become lonelier. So think about that for a moment. And my fifth and last point of reasons why being alone is better than unfulfilled is because you'll never truly be fulfilled. It's as simple as that. If you stay in an area that you know is no longer in alignment, you will never truly be fulfilled. There will always be a gap. Because yes, you still have the capability of going out and doing all these great things. But if your partner is not respectful and encouraging, or if your friends are not encouraging and cheering you on, or if they just simply don't understand that arena of your life and aren't able to maybe support you in a way that maybe they once could with something different, it really does leave us feeling unfulfilled. Because I remember I had friendships in the beginning of my journey who honestly couldn't care less that I had a podcast, couldn't take the time of day to let me know that I'm doing a good job. And I know that those things can sound narcissistic to say, but if your friends and your partners aren't uplifting you and encouraging you and pushing you to be the best version of yourself, they likely aren't your people. Because your people are going to want what's best for you. Your people are going to want to encourage you without it feeling like an attack to themselves. Right? We have to ask ourselves and have those hard conversations of, are people actually best for me? Or are they best for my present self, or are they best for my past self? Because I think, again, there's a difference there, and we have to honor what we've gone through, of how those people might have served us and we might have served them in the past. And again, this goes vice versa, because we could potentially be those people for other people that are no longer in alignment. And we also have to respect how we could be making other people feel and have that understanding that if we are not helping another person, encouraging, loving, lifting them, whatever it is, and we are not in alignment with them, they also have the right to have that conversation with you and with myself. It swings both ways, which is something that we definitely have to remember. But back to my point of you'll never be fulfilled, I always just want to preface, because it's been ingrained in my head as young as I can remember, and that's to not settle. Not to settle in any areas of your life. I refuse to settle. When people say, oh, when are you going to start to settle down? Never. I will never settle down. Yes, there's a difference between, getting a house and having kids and doing those things. But as far as settling down, that will never be my intention. I will always want to grow and evolve and become better and better and better and want to learn more and hungry to learn more. But settling is the easy thing to do. But being alone and uncomfortable is so much better, because it allows you to get fulfillment. And fulfillment is so much more rewarding than settling. I truly hope you guys enjoyed today's episode, and maybe it opened your eyes to different areas of your life, of just questioning for yourself of where are the areas that maybe aren't bringing you as much fulfillment? What are those friendships that you have that maybe aren't bringing as much fulfillment? And maybe it just means spending less time around those people and putting in boundaries. And I definitely encourage you to begin with expressing your truth. I don't think that just cutting people out of our life is always the answer. Expressing how you feel and what you need. And at that point, you're allowing yourself to express your truth, but you're also allowing other people an opportunity to respond. But if you're noticing that it's been a repeated pattern over and over again, I definitely encourage you to ask yourself if you're staying because you're settling or you're staying because you're fulfilled. Because there is a huge difference between those two. I want to thank you guys so much as always for tuning into this week's episode of Tiny Talks. I am so excited to upload this episode and hear what you guys have to say. This is definitely something that is very near and dear to my heart, and I know that it can be a really hard thing to do. And being alone can be one of the hardest things that we as humans have to do. But I can also validate that having spent quite a few months in time by myself, fully by myself, living alone for the first time in my life, it has brought me so much more direction and alignment of where I need to go. And it allows us to have the ball in our court, which is something that really we can't be given and we have to give ourselves. Thank you guys so much. I look forward to chatting with you all next week. Bye, you guys. Thank you all so much for tuning into this week's episode of Tiny Talks. I absolutely love connecting with you all, so make sure you're following me on Instagram. I am at JessieBrown13. If you enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to leave a review or share with someone you think would enjoy. I look forward to chatting with you all next week. And remember, get out of your head and into your heart.